Okay, I want to look at another news update coming from Florida just in about the last hour. They are saying that the governor, Florida, Rick Scott, is suing the Florida elections supervisor, Brenda Snipes. And very interesting that this name is involved in this new lawsuit that's being announced. This is amid allegations that the Democrats are trying to steal this race going on in Florida. And there's two races that people are still looking at. The midterms were earlier this week. It's now November 8th, 2018. And they are still waiting on results for two major races from Florida. Third race as well. I had already talked, I brought up a few times how I was very surprised by the supposed results of the race going on with Debbie Wasserman Schultz as well. Would have thought that Canova would have played more of a spoiler role potentially. He was another liberal, was going up against Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the primaries, and brings me back to Brenda Snipes, who was Tim Canova, again, the candidate going up against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. This same election official who's being sued now had already been caught up in a scandal. It looks like rigging another election for Wasserman Schultz. Canova had spoken out about this previously. One tweet, he explains it. He says, "Reality is reality. Brenda Snipes illegally destroyed all of your paper ballots in my 2016 primary against Wasserman Schultz." So he'd spent quite a lot of time talking about this, that Wasserman Schultz, who, of course, a lot of evidence that she rigged played a major role in the rigging of the national Democratic primaries. Hillary Clinton taking out Bernie Sanders, it was basically rigged. Wasserman Schultz played a big part in that. On top of that, Wasserman Schultz already rigged her own race. Brenda Snipes, it looks, was involved in that, destroying paper ballots with 9 days before the election, Canova adds, and with thousands of absentee and early ballots already cast. What could they be talking about? Referencing a meeting that they had at the time as well. There's a lot of allegations against Brenda Snipes already over that 2016 race, which conveniently helped Debbie Wasserman Schultz. People questioning the results of this race. So that's a third suspicious result that people were looking at in Florida. People also still waiting on final results on the race between Andrew Gillum, they note in this article, and we can look at what they say about the lawsuit. But I've already talked about the race between Democratic candidate Andrew Gillum and Republican Ron DeSantis. And I noted a bizarre incident that happened a few days ago, actually a day before the election, where they announced the results of the election the day before. MSNBC, they called it a misfire, where they aired the results in one of these two Florida races that are still being counted. Three that I see in Florida, at least, that are very suspicious, looking at, if you include the Debbie Wasserman Schultz one as well. That one is not under recount currently, but the Andrew Gillum and Ron DeSantis race still very close. They're saying too close to call. This was the screenshot from MSNBC the day before the midterms, saying that the vote was 99% in and that Andrew Gillum had won, saying that the race was too close to call, though. That was 49.4 compared to 48.8. That was with 99% of the votes reporting in. Turns out, as of now, it was actually DeSantis that won, but some people were wondering how similar were these early results going to be to the final results. Would Andrew Gillum actually win as they predicted early on? It was a very close race, as they said that it was so early on. If they had, I guess, early info on the rigging of this race. There were many theories as to why they posted that exactly, but very odd that they are having a hard time getting the exact numbers still on that race, and it is being contested. So they were going to give it to DeSantis. Maybe they didn't. The midterms didn't work out how these pre-planned things had decided they would be, and they are now trying to question flip some of those results because of that, potentially. I mean, there's a lot of questions in the fallout of this. A lot of big names bringing up the array of evidence of rigging going on here. It sounds like a lot going on, particularly with the race with Scott. So Brenda Snipes is being sued. It's previously been involved in these other scandals that we've already looked at. There are two Democratic strongholds, Fox News points out, that are still reporting votes. They continue to report votes days after Election Day. Senate candidate Rick Scott filed this lawsuit late Thursday, just within the last hour before going live on this video here, against Brenda Snipes, specifically the embattled Broward County Supervisor of Elections. He's alleged that she is illegally refusing to provide any information about the number of ballots cast or counted in Broward County. Bombshell litigation comes hours after Florida GOP Senator Marco Rubio, in an extraordinary series of tweets. People were sharing these tweets by Rubio that alleged incompetence, if not outright complicity. Looks like a intentional cover-up. Even a mainstream politician in Rubio. Surprising that they are calling this out to the extent that they are. Sounds like Florida officials were complicit, trying to rig this for the Democrats, it looks like. Charged that Democratic lawyers are descending on the state in a calculated attempt to change the results and try to steal races for Senate and Agriculture Commissioner. Recount now appears imminent, not only in Scott's race, but also this other Florida high-profile contest between the other one between Andrew Gillum and Ron DeSantis. That was the weird one where they posted these early results on MSNBC. DeSantis, they had announced, had won, but it looks like they may be trying to give that to Gillum based on new vote totals. This is even though this was after Gillum had already conceded as well, they note. They're saying that Scott's emergency complaint accuses Snipes of being, quote, unwilling to disclose records revealing how many electors voted, how many ballots have been canvassed, and how many ballots remain to be canvassed, and charges that uncertainty raises substantial concerns about the validity of the election process. National Republican Senatorial Committee specifically alleged that Snipes is in violation of the Florida Constitution and the Florida Public Records Act. They demand an emergency hearing as well as a court order requiring Snipes to turn over info about ballots in Broward County. They have the one of the tweets from Rubio. He sent got a series of tweets. It's one tweet from Marco Rubio saying, according to South Florida Sun Centennial, these two blue bins circled in the attached picture hold the ballots that remain to be counted in Broward County as of 4:20 this afternoon, almost 48 hours after the polls closed. Rubio, in his barrage of broadsides against Snipes earlier in the day, he pointed to the slow drip of tens of thousands of additional ballots that were reported throughout the day Thursday, most of which were favorable to several Democratic candidates, conveniently, including Scott's opponent, incumbent Senator Bill Nelson. Rubio said that those late disclosures violated Florida election law, which necessitates that mail-in and early voting ballots be counted within 30 minutes of polls closing. Another quote from Rubio saying Bay County was hit by a Category 4 hurricane just 4 weeks ago, yet they managed to count votes and submit timely results. Yet after 41 hours of polls closed, Broward Elections Office is still counting votes. He questions those claims that they're making, election officials. Rubio added later today, why can't Broward County elections do what 65 of 67 counties did, count all votes in a timely way and in compliance with Florida law? Rubio made clear he has no confidence in Snipes' integrity earlier in the day. Finally, just say, they give another quote, again, which reads, U.S. Senate seat and statewide cabinet officer are now potentially in the hands of an elections supervisor with a history of incompetence and blatant violations of state and federal laws. W. Wasserman Schultz, 2016 primary, one example. So that was written linking to a Miami Herald article describing several scandals that have gripped Broward County's elections department. There's others as well. That was just one of the most popular ones so far, most talked about. Earlier this year, they note that a judge had found that Snipes had illegally destroyed ballots in the 2016 congressional contest, leading the governor's office to assign elections monitors to supervise her. I think the problems are blown out of proportion, Snipes said in October in an interview with the Miami Herald. Broward is nitpicked to the bone. Other places have the same problems, different problems. It's just that they are not spotlighted like we are, she said. They have a link to the court documents here to the lawsuit, adding that vote totals in several major races in the state are changing rapidly on an irregular schedule and sometimes late into the evening. Scott, who is also Florida's governor, was ahead of Nelson by roughly 1/4 of 1 percentage point as of Thursday morning, according to the Tampa Bay Times. Paper also said agriculture commissioner candidates were separated by only 0.06 points. The race flipped in favor of the Democratic candidate on Thursday afternoon. Broward County reported that significantly more votes were received in the agriculture commissioner contest than the much higher profile Senate election. So the amount of votes also called into question. An attorney for Nelson's campaign suggested a computer error might explain that anomaly. In the closely watched race between DeSantis and Gillum, DeSantis held a narrow 0.52 percentage point edge over Gillum as of Thursday morning, extremely close to the 0.5% threshold needed to trigger a machine recount. Gillum had already conceded the race. Again, they're saying, although the decision is non-binding. By Thursday afternoon, though, unofficial figures had DeSantis up by just 38,500 votes, roughly, out of the more than 8 million cast. That was a lead of just 0.47%, low enough to trigger a mandatory recount, according to Tallahassee, the Tallahassee Democrat. No recount has been announced by Florida Secretary of State, and the first unofficial count is expected to be verified Saturday by Florida Secretary of State. So very interesting. We'll have to continue to follow further developments. Look at a couple other quotes from Marco Rubio. He did send off a series of tweets. It's interesting that he is this involved in this, again, being an establishment politician. This type of fraud, I'm sure, happens regularly, but they actually seem to be fighting back. It looks like, at least on the surface, they're fighting back in some of these races in this case. So wondering why that is exactly. Looks like these are the current counts, fairly current, within about the last hour again on the two races. Ron DeSantis here, still ahead, very narrowly ahead over Andrew Gillum. And the Rick Scott race, percentage-wise, is even closer. It's 50.1% versus 49.9% for Bill Nelson. So Rick Scott is going ahead with this lawsuit. This might be, if you haven't looked at Marco Rubio's Twitter today, I recommend maybe just looking at his Twitter page. Another tweet from him saying Broward election supervisors' ongoing violation of Florida law requiring timely reporting isn't just annoying incompetence. It has opened the door for lawyers to come here and try to steal a seat in the U.S. Senate and Florida cabinet. This is in favor of the Democrats. They're trying to steal these seats, he's alleging. Saying without providing legally sufficient justification, Rubio has said Democrat-controlled Broward and Palm Beach counties on Wednesday afternoon continued to report new ballots, cutting into Scott's already thin lead and flipping the state's agriculture commissioner race to Democrats. Provisional ballots cast by voters without proper ID or at the wrong location are factoring into the late results also. And Florida officials, for some reason, are also rejecting campaigns' requests for the identity of those voters, citing federal and state law. Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections also told Fox that it's still counting about 2,000 mail-in ballots where voters circled or highlighted by drawing an arrow pointing at the candidate's name, their choice, instead of filling in the appropriate bubbles. . They just close off saying under Florida law, the state elections department is allowed to determine voter intent. Butcher told Fox that elections department staff is going through each of the 2,000 mail-in ballots, and where voter intent is determined, a worker is filling in a new ballot on behalf of the voter. Where voter intent cannot be determined, the ballot is sent to the canvassing board to undergo review. I wonder if they would have gone through those measures if it wasn't so close, or they're saying these races are so close. I guess they're one side is trying to count every last vote, hoping that it works in their favor. I guess they're saying these most recent votes are favoring the Democrats, or what they're claiming these votes are. If they're real, definitely suspicious. Almost everything that we're hearing here say that election officials are also reviewing 1,500 military and overseas ballots, which are still being counted. Florida law allows military service members to mail or fax ballots in. Provisional vote reports is due in Tallahassee by noon on Saturday. Of one final quote saying Broward election supervisors ongoing of violation of Florida law requiring timely reporting isn't just annoying incompetence. Again, the quote from Rubio. Broward County election officials did not return Fox's request for comment, they say, and they close off saying Florida law dictates that if the margin in any race hits 0.25% or lower, manual recount of any ballot set aside from the machine recount will be ordered. So that is why they are counting, I guess, most of. I think that does include these 2,000. Probably wouldn't have been counted if it wasn't in the 0.25% range. They are counting them so that it's reminiscent of the scene in the 2000 presidential election, where the country was gripped by images of poll workers counting votes, deciphering, hanging chads by hand. Going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, what the final results are. That story with MSNBC, that early reporting, they reported the results the day early. It sounds like they wanted to give it to Andrew Gillum, and then Ron DeSantis, they were saying, was going to win after. Well, it looked like the results were that DeSantis won, although there was evidence that it was possibly going to be rigged for Andrew Gillum, or they had planned that, and now they're trying to move it back to Gillum, possibly. Also, Scott and Nelson, how that plays out, and really strange the role of Brenda Snipes, the fact that she's still in the position to play a part in yet another scandal, another midterm scandal, after looks like playing a huge part in rigging primaries for Debbie Wasserman Schultz back in 2016 already. Why is Brenda Snipes still in that position to do that? Let me know what you think about all the news that we have on this. I am over on patreon.com. I have a link to that and my PayPal in the video description, and links to the articles if you want to take a look. I'll follow up as new info comes out. Thank you.